Good morning, Tri-Cities. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, so it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl from Tridec. And as usual on our webinars, we have some great guests today. We are excited to be able to talk to the Benton Franklin Recovery Center. And this morning we have Michelle Gerber, who's the chair of the Recovery Center. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. And also Nancy Roach, who is a board member for the Recovery Center. Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning, Karl. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. On this snowy morning, I'm glad we're remote. I did want to give out thank you for our sponsor, Mike Miller with Moon Security. We just watched their video. Mike and his team offer great services to the Tri-Cities, longtime Tri-City business. As you can see, they offer solutions for home security and for business. So if you have any security questions or concerns, make sure you go and see Mike and his team in downtown Pasco. So thanks, Mike and Moon Security. Okay, well, let's kick off like we usually do and we always do with our coffee cup or mug story. And because it's December 1st, which we just learned is Michelle's birthday, happy birthday, Michelle.
Thank you.
I went ahead and broke out my Snoopy Christmas mug because I think today with the snow, it does feel like Christmas. And our kids gave me this a while ago. And obviously everybody loves Snoopy, but it does feel very festive and Christmassy today. And I think, Michelle, you shared with us that you said the weather's always bad on your birthday.
It is. It is.
But, you know, hopefully we'll look forward to some more rain so it'll melt off. And also it does look very Christmassy today. So Michelle, would you like to share your mug with us?
My mug is Japanese design. My oldest son is married to a Japanese woman. And so they've had several trips to Japan and they've brought us several gifts. And this is one of my Japanese mugs.
That's great. I like the kind of like the cartoon style or the caricatures. So yeah, it's really cool.
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you. Nancy, how about you? Do you have a mug story to share with us?
I do, actually. This is, can you see that? Yes. So this one is from a dear friend in Maine. It is my favorite color. It's handcrafted. And it reminds me of the fun times that we've shared. So it's good on lots of different levels. Memories, color, the handcrafted nature of it. It's my favorite mug.
Oh, that's great. What part of Maine does your friend live in? She's
in, gosh, what's the name of the city? I can't remember right off the top of my head.
Oh, that's okay.
But yeah.
No worries. A long time ago, I traveled to Maine on business pretty often. And being from the Northwest, it was the place that reminded me the most of home. Just like we go out in the forest and kind of mountains and stuff like that. So it's a good place.
It just came to me. It's Portland.
Okay. Perfect. Down in Southern Maine. That's great. Thank you. Okay, well, for the folks joining us on the webinar today, if you have any questions as we go, we're going to have some slides that Michelle and Nancy will go through and kind of explain sort of the backstory and the progress that's been made with the Recovery Center, and then we'll get into questions. So if anybody has any questions as we go through the slides, if you're on Zoom, you can ask the questions below in the question and answer feature. If you're joining us on social media, you can ask questions in the comment section, and we'll do our best to get to everybody's questions if you do have any. So I think it's best, maybe Michelle, if you're comfortable with it, let's just start off with the slides, because I think the slides do a great job of kind of telling the story and explaining where you guys are at, and then we'll get into the questions after that, if that's okay.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's our title and our logo. We want people to know that a resident of Benton or Franklin counties dies of addiction every 5 days, and 5 to 6 people per day die of addiction in Washington state. And in our nation, 1 every 5 minutes. And that's 24/7, 365 days a year. So approximately 30 million Americans are in active addiction today. And most of them, 65 to 70%, are employed in the workplace. So really, we have to assume that addiction is in every workplace, in school, church, business, and neighborhood. And we just have to face that fact and get busy with solutions. It is a treatable disease, and 1 in 15 Americans are in recovery at this time, leading productive lives. And there is a reason that everyone should be concerned, even if you're not affected personally or your family is not affected. That is that the US Surgeon General says that every dollar spent in treatment saves $7 to $12 in other social costs. And those would be things like the time of our police forces, sheriffs, court time, emergency rooms, costs that accrue to those activities, and all the other social costs of low productivity, accidents, etc. So those costs are hidden, but we're paying them every day. So if we do treatment, we can save other costs, although those other costs might not jump out as a hard number. We know they're there. Our Tri-Cities, unfortunately, is the only metro area in the state that has no detoxification facility and no inpatient residential treatment facility for addiction. And, you know, it's a mistaken belief that hospitals treat addiction. They do not. They will wake someone up from an overdose, but then they're discharged. So there's simply not any treatment facilities here that we desperately need. Next slide, please. So in 2018, a group of citizens came together to address this shortage. It's actually a small meeting on my back porch. And we said the Tri-Cities deserves better, and we want to have better and more treatment here. So we had adopted the philosophy of a warm handoff. That is, every time there's a crisis in the life of an addicted person, for example, an overdose, an arrest, being evicted, those crises should result in the next connection to treatment. That would be the warm handoff, not the cold shoulder, which is let's get through this crisis as quickly as possible, put it behind us and pretend it never happened. So we decided that we wanted to establish a comprehensive recovery center for SUD, that's substance use disorder. That is the technical name for addiction, and mental illness, because these two conditions are closely related. Next slide, please. So we formed the Benton Franklin Recovery Coalition. We incorporated as a nonprofit. We're completely private. We've never taken one penny of government money or public money of any kind. We are run by volunteers, and we receive no fees or payments of any kind for our work. No salaries, expense funds, or other fees, and no paid staff. We were founded in 2018, incorporated in 2019, and we are the largest recovery coalition in the state of Washington, I'm proud to say, and that really makes King County very jealous because they think they should be the largest in everything, but we are the largest in the state. Yay, Tri-Cities. Next slide, please. This is our organization, our board of directors. We have some very distinguished people, medical doctors, treatment professionals, people that run agencies. So next slide, please. And we realized, though, that to achieve our goal, we needed to partner with government. So we approached Benton County, and immediately Commissioner Jerome Dalvin and Prosecutor Andy Miller at the time said yes. Others who said yes immediately are former Senator Sharon Brown, our Matt Banky, who was then a representative, is now our senator, Kennewick Police Chief Chris Guerrero. And so together in 2020, we developed a capital project request to the legislature and received our first $2.7 million in early 2021. Next slide, please. The coalition helps Benton County with state and federal grant applications. We advocate and testify at state committees, and we have meetings with and personal interactions, giving information to our legislators and their staffs. And by doing that, we have now gathered $21.3 million. It's not enough. We're still out there. We'll still get more. But again, the Recovery Coalition takes none of these funds. All the funds go to Benton County. Next slide, please. This is a glance at our funding sources. $5 million has come from the county 14 million from the state and 2 million from the federal government. Next slide, please. These are some of our supporters. We have great supporters. You can see pictures of Commissioner Delvin, Police Chief Guerrero, Senator Banky, Andy Miller, Judge Jennifer Azure, Councilman Chuck Torelli of Kennewick, Prosecutor Sean Sant of Franklin County. Down in the lower right corner is Teresa Richardson of the Richland City Council and Jim Milbauer of the Kennewick City Council. We've got a lot of great supporters. And one of those photos is Representative Stephanie Barnard, and we have others. So next slide, please. So Nancy's going to take over and talk about our project as it stands right now.
So about a year and a half ago, Benton County purchased the Trios Hospital, formerly KGH, and we are looking to use that facility for SUD treatment and transitional sober housing. Because of a deed restriction in the purchase agreement with LifePoint, the corporate entity out of Tennessee that owned the both Trios or Kennewick General Hospital building, a second facility needed to be purchased by Benton County for mental health issues. Mental health disease will be triaged and cared for at the Bruno Street facility. This is the current plan, because the deed restriction allowed for assessment only and a 72-hour hold for those whose primary diagnosis is mental illness. So we have now, at this point, hired a medical contractor. Comprehensive Healthcare was hired as of May 2023. Excuse me, we have a design build contractor that was selected in September, about in construction. And the facility name chosen is the Columbia Valley Center for Recovery. So CVCR will be very well known in the community, and we're doing our very best to get this message out. Next slide, please. The services in the Recovery Center are flexible at this point. As we continue to develop the design of the building, we're looking at what facilities and we could offer and when they could be offered. But these are those facilities that we want to include without any question. We want a drop-off service. We want an assessment service. We want a secure withdrawal management service. We want inpatient residential treatment for SUD. We want crisis stabilization service and possibly inpatient residential services for mental health. And an additional transitional service also later on down the road for those who leave the SUD treatment facility, the inpatient, and want to move into transitional housing. So these are the services that we plan for and we hope to have available ideally on day 1, 2025. Next slide, please. And as you see, because we have 193,000 square feet at the Kennewick General Hospital campus alone, we have available space for other services, and you can see what those are here. We possibly would offer family programs, adolescent and child services, disabled services, outpatient, et cetera, et cetera. So as we move forward, we keep our options open for additional services in the future. Next slide, please. I think this is a very important slide here because we need to consider what a facility like this will do for our community. We consider this an anchor facility because it will employ a large number of people. There will be businesses that will spin off from the recovery center. It will obviously create jobs. It will lower law enforcement and jail costs, lower public health insurance costs. It will provide a substantial return on investment to local employers. And currently, we're sending employees and their family members to treatment outside of the area. This will keep treatment dollars local. It will also provide a key asset for employers in attracting high quality workers to the Tri-Cities, which is a very important spin-off of this endeavor. Very important community benefit also would be that we would improve the safety, hygiene, and marketability of the Tri-Cities overall. Currently, without these services, it really does not enhance what Tri-Cities can offer businesses and individuals who want to come here. Next slide, please. So what the Benton Franklin Recovery Coalition is aimed at is raising private funds to purchase extras for the recovery center to enhance and promote the recovery experience. And this is really important because we want to provide a state-of-the-art facility, one that that is livable, so to speak, one that really allows for growth and change among those who are there for perhaps a fairly long period of time. So this would include a recreation room or gymnasium. We currently already have designated funds for gymnasium equipment. We would like to provide an art therapy room, a family lounge, a multi-purpose classroom, an outdoor complex. This is key to have green space for those who want to exercise, which is an important part of the recovery process. We might consider a van that would transport clients between the two facilities. We would consider providing vouchers for both personal supplies and meals. And this could possibly include vouchers for family members whose resources have been severely depleted because of the addiction of their loved one. So these are areas where the Recovery Coalition is involved and actively raising funds for. Next slide, please. So our partnership with the Benton County has been formalized. Though we are a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, we have a unique public-private partnership with the county. Now that has been formalized just this year, early this year, with a document called a Memorandum of Understanding between the Benton Franklin Recovery Coalition and Benton County. This means that the nonprofit Benton Franklin Recovery Coalition can raise funds from private donors who receive a tax benefit. We can then direct that money into a special account that Benton County can use to procure amenities for the recovery center. We can also purchase items for ourselves to have installed in the recovery center. So this relationship has been formalized with the approval of the Benton County Commissioners. And we are very pleased to say that we work closely with the commissioners and with the county administrators. It's really, I think, a unique and very beneficial relationship between the two entities. Next slide, please. So again, we raise funds through direct solicitation of donors, through special events like the 5K run that was held September 16th. We received memorials of those who have died due to their addiction. We are very grateful for those contributions. Additionally, we are planning our first public event. Next slide, please. And that will be held February 29th. Some of you may not realize that 2024 is leap year, and February 29th is leap day. So we chose that day and have designated it to be a leap to recovery. Our breakfast will be held at the Hapo Center in Pasco. And so we are moving forward with sponsorships for that event and in inviting folks within the community to come and support the Recovery Coalition with their presence at the event. So thank you very much. I think that's the last slide, is it? Oh, no, it's not. Oh, Michelle, our founding president, has written a beautiful testimonial to her son who died of his addiction. The book is now available. It's called Witness to Addiction. It offers practical solutions and actions that everyone can take to fight back against drug addiction. It's highly recommended for schools, employers, parents, and grandparents, anyone who has an addicted loved one and who will be empowered and consoled in a way by this story of Michelle's and her family's journey accompanying Michelle's son through his addiction. So it is an empowering book, and I highly recommend it. And it's available there at Michelle's website, michellegerberauthor.com. Next, yes. So thank you for listening. And we say our tagline on our website, which is 509recovery.org, is that we want to make recovery the new epidemic. So I suggest that you go to our website, and you will find more information about what the coalition is doing and how you might become a part of this great effort in our community. Thank you.
That's great. Michelle and Nancy, thank you for running through those slides. I think that gives us a great place to start. And Michelle, you know, the book that you wrote about your son, I know you've talked about it before, but I think that's what strikes me in the conversations we've had over the years, and then, you know, maybe where we can start off with our conversation. But obviously, you guys have both had a direct connection to addiction and kind of lived through it, and maybe that obviously increased your awareness, and then, you know, the need to come together for this critical community mission is really, I think, a touching backstory, because we talked about it a little bit before you came on, you know, that it's easy sometimes. And I loved your first couple slides where you're talking like to employers, right? That says $1 spent on treatment can save all these other costs. And I think that employers, to some greater or lesser degree, realize if they've had a person that's gone through addiction, they understand the costs to their company and everything else, but then just to families. And I think as people, we just kind of think, oh, that doesn't apply to me. But to have those personal stories, I just appreciate you guys opening up and sharing it, because I think it's part of helping people understand and you know, realizing how critically important this is. So thank you for sharing those and opening up. But yeah, it's great. Anything else to add to that? Sorry, it wasn't really a question. It was just kind of a statement.
Well, I think I would just add, Karl, that as we present our story to folks in the Tri-Cities, it's remarkable how many come forward and say, thank you for doing this, because I have a loved one who definitely needs services. And it gives us opportunities to share our stories of our own family members. And there's a real connection there. There's a lot of passion for this project once people get connected to it.
Yeah. No, definitely. So in 2018, you guys kind of formed the coalition and came together and started to meet, but like you said, there's no recovery center in the Tri-Cities or regionally here. So are there other recovery centers in other parts of the state that have successes? You know, like as you reached out and did some research, are there other like good examples that you guys are kind of modeling on? Or I mean, obviously you're trying to and will make it much better than any other part of the state, like you said about King County, but any like in your research, any other recovery centers in the state that are good examples of how this process works?
Well, there are some recovery centers in the state. Unfortunately, they all have waiting lists. This is a very great need that so far hasn't been met. So, for instance, on the west side of the state in the legislature, they are thanking us for providing, or we're about to provide, beds to take some of the pressure off of their waiting lists. You find recovery centers in Spokane, in Yakima, even some tiny ones in places like Wenatchee, but you know, we don't have that. And I think our model actually came from the state of Arizona, and there is a wonderful they've done a wonderful job down there. And there are a couple of facilities in Tucson and Phoenix that we visited and the county commissioners visited, and that's where we took our example.
Yeah. And in your model, and I think you guys have been really clear and you explained that relationship, but this is kind of maybe once the coalition helped increase the awareness with the commissioners and the county in general and the staff there, and I guess kind of educated them, they've really kind of picked up the ball, right? Because as you described, you do have a public-private partnership. You have an agreement now, but ultimately the county will be responsible for it. They hired the contractor that's going to provide the services and everything else, right? It's going to be Benton County that will own the facility and ultimately be in charge of making sure it works.
Exactly. Benton County is the owner. And the coalition will at some point sort of devolve into a foundation that simply, continues to provide support. We don't own anything. We don't have we don't hold the contracts. And the funding, the ongoing operational funding will come from the payers, from the people who come in and pay for the service.
Okay.
So it's not an ongoing drain on the county is not going to be subsidizing, into the future.
I think it's important to note in that regard, Karl, that both Benton and Franklin counties have passed a 0.1% behavioral health tax for recovery services and for operations of the recovery center in the case of Benton County. So that's an ongoing source of funding for recovery services in our community.
Okay. Well, that covers a lot, right? Because I know in economic development, both counties have what we call a 0.09 fund, and it's sales tax dollars that otherwise would go back to the state that are retained locally for economic development projects. And it sounds like maybe this would be similar to that. So it doesn't necessarily increase sales tax, but it just retains some of it that would go to the state anyway, and then could be used for the recovery centers. That sort of the way it works.
Yes, the 0.1% sales tax can also be used for other chemical dependency services, such as the therapeutic courts.
Okay.
So that it's a shared fund, but we definitely expect that we will receive this. The center will receive some of those funds.
Okay. And is there? Oh, go ahead.
I could point out that even that sign of progress within our community, the implementation of that tax is a result of the momentum that was built, I believe, by the coalition early on.
Yeah.
And particularly the work of Michelle very early on, where we raised awareness in our community of the need for this. Yeah. So the coalition has been really instrumental in getting this project up and running.
Definitely. And is there the court that you just mentioned, Michelle, is that already in place in both counties or in the shared bi-county court system? Do they have I forget what you called it, but is that already in place? Are they using therapeutic court? Yeah.
Yes, Benton County has several. They have veterans court, mental health court, drug court, and then a brand new court that's it's kind of a drug court, but it's for more minor offenses. Drug court specifically takes people that have been accused of a felony. But this other drug court, this newer one, will take people who have been accused of drug-related misdemeanors, which is the majority, of course. And then Franklin County has just instituted a therapeutic court. I don't know much about it. Do you, Nancy?
Okay.
I don't, but I know it's on its way, which is really good news.
Yeah, and I think maybe in our previous conversations, you guys have brought this up, but again, the general population may not understand kind of the arc that somebody that deals with addiction goes through. And a lot of times there is a correlation in between some of these offenses and interaction with the law enforcement, unfortunately, that they go through that are addiction related. And that's what you're talking about, right? Like as kind of the addiction gets worse, they start to do things that normally they wouldn't do that involve law enforcement. It's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's just part of this. It's part of the cycle. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, addiction is a brain disease, and that's not an excuse. That doesn't mean home free. You get to do what you want, but it's just a fact that the chemicals change the brain, and they actually do physically change it, and to the point that there are compulsions. And driven by those compulsions, people are going to do things they wouldn't do otherwise. I mean, good, honest people may become thieves and shoplifters and other crimes. And so, those are a direct result of the disease. And the police are a wonderful ally of us. As sheriffs and police our coalition is full of them, and they are a natural ally because they realize they cannot cure this. They can, put a person sort of, on hold for a few days or whatever the sentence is, but they can't fix the problem. So they want They want this. They want to have a place that can change the behavior.
Yeah.
Benton County receives about 2,500 calls related to annually related to behavioral health issues. For emergency services, about 2,500. Ideally, with more services available that aren't tied in with the criminal justice system, where you can actually put someone into a recovery center instead of into jail, and that makes a big difference in their journey to recovery. So they aren't dealing with their record, etc. And I think it just enhances their opportunities for success.
Yeah. Well, I in other jobs that I've had, I've learned about some of the huge challenges in mental health. And I think, as you guys have said before, the crossover with addiction and mental health, the way the system works, if you don't have something like the recovery center and then like the Euclid Street mental health facility that the county's planning, law enforcement and healthcare become the de facto like treatment centers, right? So as whether it's mental health or addiction, people get to a place where law enforcement's called in and then they have to deal with it. I think I just said, Michelle, like their awareness, because 2,500 calls a year, like they're dealing with it whether they want to or not. And there really isn't a solution, like you just said. It's only just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it. It's not getting down to these root causes like you're talking about.
When we started at the very beginning, we were strategizing, how are we going to grow into a viable movement? And we said, let's look at who are our natural allies. And the first thing that came up was law enforcement and the court system. Another natural ally would be the fire and EMS systems. Yeah. Of course, the hospitals and private practitioners in medicine that, once again, they don't really want to deal with these people because they know it's not a short-term fix. And they know that they can simply be the revolving door. So we have a number of other, groups that sort of came alongside and said, this is what gave the movement, made it Tri-Cities wide, made it more than just people in recovery and their families.
Yeah. So once the center's up and moving, and I think you guys showed that there's a contractor now, so I assume maybe they've already kind of broken ground or early next year. Is that kind of timeline for actually starting that construction phase with your design build contractor?
Well, the Kennewick General Hospital is 71 years old, and it's going to take. I think they're discovering more and more day by day since September. Some of the things they're going to have to fix before we can even lay out, where the treatment rooms are going to be and this and that. So right now they're into that sort of discovery phase and also cost validation. What's it going to really take? Yeah. This is a building that, was built to the Uniform Building Code of 1949. Yeah. And at that point, asbestos was required. It was required because they thought it was good. PCBs were in the light ballasts, the heating system, the roof, all these things are, going to have to be looked at. There may have been some remediation in the past. Nobody's really sure of the extent of that. So right now, that's what they're doing. I think we'll have a groundbreaking, so-called, where they actually start to move walls and things in the spring. Okay.
And then once they go through the build out and stuff, so once it opens, I guess what can you walk us through what the process would be for somebody that is going through addiction, either if they're referred there through law enforcement or the family is able to get them through the front doors, and like what does that look like for the patients, or what will that process look like?
Nancy, do you want to take that?
Well, we still can't say for sure what that's going to look like, because this budget validation process is key to understanding how the system will work. But what we initially planned for was that all assessment would be done at the Bruno location. And Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but that intake would be at the Bruno facility, because if someone comes in with a mental health diagnosis, we don't want them to have to be moved. They would be then there, stay there, because they could only stay for 72 hours at the KGH location. So that was why we initially thought that the assessment and intake would be at the Bruno facility. What we are really committed to, Karl, and I think this is really important to emphasize, is that there is no wrong door. So anyone who is brought in, whether it's at the Bruno facility or KGH, is going to not be released until they have been properly assessed and cared for. Okay. And so that is our commitment. Do you want to say anything more about that, Michelle?
That no wrong door concept is fundamental to us, because there are so many reasons people are turned away or they're made to wait. Insurance, paperwork, is the staff compatible for this or that condition? And what happens is a person, when they're ready for treatment, when they finally say, I want to change my life, I'm going to give this a try, you have to get them right then, because the chemicals are powerful and they will take over and they will change the thinking very quickly. If you have to go and be signed up somewhere and wait for 3 weeks, you've lost the person. They're going back. They will go back to the streets and reuse drugs. And so we believe that the success rate will be much higher if you can just come in. We're looking at a large lobby type facility with recliner chairs, so that you will come in and be calmed down no matter what, and talked to and assessed. And a lot of the staff will be what we call peers. And peers are people who are in recovery themselves, been in recovery at least a year, and have at least a high school education and a state training class. Now, they can have more education than that, but it's not required. And so there's that empathy factor where the person is immediately placed in a recliner and met with someone who's been there, who could say, look, I was here 2 years ago and I've changed my life, and I think you can do it too. And that's so much better than the cold clinical, sitting across a desk from somebody with a notepad who's scrutinizing you. So that's the model we'll start with.
I think that that is definitely one of the 4 services that we hope to provide initially. It'd be a 23-hour observation, which is described by Michelle. We would also provide a crisis stabilization for those who are in mental health crisis. And then withdrawal management is really important, or detox. And then residential SUD treatment is key. So those are the 4 services that we really are striving to implement on day 1.
Yeah. And I think you guys talked about it, but the crossover between mental health, addiction, and then there's got to be a correlation to homelessness as well, right? Like, are there statistics or figures that you're thinking about? And I think that, and this is just a layperson's driving around town view, that we don't seem to have as large of an increase in our homeless population as other cities do. Like, I used to live in Spokane, and obviously we know Seattle and Portland and stuff, but it's still a very big issue. But are there, national or local statistics that show some of that crossover with homelessness, addiction, and mental health issues?
There are. I can't cite them for you.
Yeah.
Right off the top, but that's something I ought to look up and be able to speak to. But just talking, to our police officers and probation officers and things, they'll tell you it's 80%. It's very high percentage of crossover. Yeah. Person isn't on the streets because they want to be. No one wants to live like that. So exactly. It's because their disease process has gotten them to where they cannot help themselves. And again, I would like to say it's a disease, but it's not a get out of jail free card, so to speak. It's not, okay, well, because we understand it's a disease, we're going to tolerate it. It's not that. We still need to take action. We still need to take action and not let people harm other people or harm their property or their businesses. We are not in favor of any kind of, just let it be because they're sick. No, something needs to be done.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So as you described, and realizing this is still kind of in process, but someone go to the Bruno facility, they'd go through kind of that initial screening, interact with the peers, kind of maybe a triage, kind of where do they belong, and then the recovery center then would be for folks that would be diagnosed, I guess, with SGD, so the addiction disorder, and then through billing like their insurance company, or if they qualified for Medicare, Medicaid, I guess, then they would be kind of in-house treated at the recovery center. Is that the way it goes? With the recovery center, though, also have kind of inpatient mental health, help too, or I don't want to say treatment, but is it mainly be focused on addiction and recovery, right, at the recovery center?
At the Kennewick General Hospital, yes, that will be addiction treatment. Okay. And like Nancy said, there are long hallways there of rooms that can be immediately, with the help of some grants, put to use as transitional housing. So dormitory style transitional housing. So when you finish the treatment, you may still not be ready to be on your own, or you may have so depleted your resources, or your family doesn't trust you anymore and they won't take you in until you've let some time go by. Then we want to have that housing. And luckily on our board, we have the person, Jason Bliss, who's head of the Washington Alliance for Quality Recovery Residences, which is a state agency. And he is, even though it's a state agency, he lives here and he's on our board. And so he's right on top of how we can institute the housing piece. And then the mental health piece will be at the other facility.
Yeah. I'm just struck by, and I've said it before, I'm still call myself the new person here. I've just been here in our family about 3.5 years, but I think this is another great example of our community coming together to solve an issue, right? That we know I think the Tri-Cities has a very, very long history of doing that, that when there's a problem, a challenge, the community comes together and, puts the right people together and has a long success story of accomplishing many great things. I think this is another one of them, because I think for folks, and, I think of families that are going through, addiction or mental health challenges, or, any of the other kind of ancillary things that come out of it, to know that this facility, that this service is there, has got to be a comfort for people that are dealing with it now. And, like you guys said in your slideshow, I really appreciate the fact that as we're talking to new companies or new businesses or new people that are coming to the Tri-Cities, to have this as one of the things that we do. And I think of just, community support for families. It's a great example of that. It really means a lot. So I guess I'm not really asking a question again. I'm just saying thank you.
Karl, though, it's a great segue to just let the community know that there is a committee called the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee that was formed shortly after the Kennewick General Hospital was purchased by Benton County. It's made up of providers and community representatives who have had lived experience with addiction that meet regularly to advise on how the behavioral health funds should be spent. And so you've got the two counties coming together in this way on a regular basis. And additionally, you have this issue just bringing those on the whole political spectrum together. Democrats and Republicans all have come together and supported this effort. Wouldn't you say, Michelle? On the west side, we've had the support of some key Democrats who have helped us get state funding. Senator Patty Murray and Senator Maria Cantwell are very much in favor of what we're doing, as is Dan Newhouse, Kathy McMorris Rogers. So we've really bridged that political gap as well as the county gap, which sometimes, there's tension between the counties. But on this issue, we really think we brought the community together.
When you speak about community efforts, I know Nancy was part of the effort to build the Tri-Cities Cancer Center. And I've been part of the effort, my husband and I, to build the Reach Museum, and to way back before that, the Save the Reach movement, where we enlisted Patty Murray back in 1988. And so we've been a part of these community efforts, where I remember the effort to build the Reach Museum. One of the selling points was, a community has to offer cultural things to prospective people who might want to move here and be relocated, have their business here. Again, all these facilities that a community can say, we've got this in case you ever need it. We have an addiction recovery center. And even if you don't need it, it will be helping people who are now on the street, and maybe they won't be on the street when you get here.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Because I think, just like you guys have shared your stories, I was just even thinking of, just like as a person and your awareness of issues like addiction or mental health. And I think I saw autism was one of the things. We have 2 kids on the autism spectrum. And I think, before we had kids, or when they were younger, before they were diagnosed, just thinking like, oh, autism, well, that's, I don't have to worry about that. We'll never deal with it. And just, not like a denial, but just like an unawareness. And then, as a family, once you go through it, then obviously your awareness is heightened, and then you see gaps, just like you guys are describing in your journey. And I think it's just a natural progression that people go through. And so to have that facility and those the services in your community is huge. And you're, kind of just being unaware of them because you don't think you need them. And then when you do need them, if they're not there, it's really a challenge. If they are there, then it's great to have that support. And so I think that's, I just, as I listen to your mission and to your message, I think it's an important thing. That we all, just as people, we need to think about, because we all kind of get busy with our own lives or our jobs or whatever, and we just forget about that part. And I guess that's what Christmas is all about. It's about caring about other people. So maybe it's a good time that we're having this, especially on Michelle's birthday.
Well, picking up on that, I can tell you that I never knew an addicted person in my life until my son became addicted. When we became aware of it, had no idea what to do or what we were dealing with. And so, part of what the coalition tries to do is education. We offer education classes. We've done it 3 times now in our 5-year history, and we're planning to do it again in 2024. And those are classes for families who are saying, what has happened? This normal person all of a sudden is stealing from me or lying, or, I have no idea what to do. And that's where we want to come in and possibly, and I can't say this for sure because it's up to the provider, but generate a volunteer group that will be at the recovery center to counsel parents and say, I know you're bewildered. You didn't know this was going to happen to you. And so let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's another great example of the community coming together and just people being very giving, which I think, our experience is our community is very giving. We come together just like these examples that you gave, and we've got this long history of fixing problems. So what's next? I mean, you talked about the fundraiser on Leap Day, and even are there more legislative asks? Like, does the county have the funding now to move forward, realizing that if there are some things that come up in this discovery phase, maybe they'll need some more money? But like, what are the next steps? What can the community do to help bring the recovery center to just get it going and get it up and running? What are some next steps?
Nancy, that's you.
Well, we are a part of the Washington Recovery Alliance, which annually has a day dedicated to advocating for policies and legislation that will impact recovery opportunities in the state. And that's coming up at the end of January. We've been there for the last 3 or 4 years since the coalition was formed. And so we will be advocating for more funding. We currently have been made aware that we have possibly funding that might be available through a capital budget that's aimed at housing those with addiction or mental illness. So we're going to try and go that route and get more funding that way. In terms of community involvement, you know, as we approach that day of advocacy, it would be good for the coalition to gather together. Michelle, I'm just suggesting this to you as I speak, but testimonials from people in our community. So that when we go, Michelle and I or whoever else goes to this advocacy day, we come armed with lots of testimonials as to services that we need in our community. So we'll do that. We're continuing, as Michelle said, with the education initiatives. I hope that we'll put on in 2024 another workshop on suffering from the grief and trauma of addiction. That's very important. But regarding the recovery center, we're also working at the federal level with both Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell's offices to get some federal dollars for the recovery center. So I think that's what's happening in the coming year.
Now, Congressman Newhouse has formed a fentanyl task force, and Nancy is on that. She is appointed and so she goes to Yakima every 3 months and helps strategize with other people from Central Washington.
That's great. I think on the legislative ask, I think, you know, one thing I would say, my opinion, that COVID was good on is that the legislature now takes remote testimony. And, you know, so if there's a funding bill or something, I know in different things that we've worked on, and we do have the Tri-Cities Legislative Council that's TRIDEC, and all of our local chambers of commerce and Visit Tri-Cities. And I know that you guys have presented to us before and we've supported that legislation, but I think that remote testimony and even remote signing on to support a bill or a funding request is a great opportunity. We don't have to drive to Olympia, you know, in winter and fast and stuff. So anything that you guys, I guess, could help spread the word on, or that we could all kind of chime in, or even through the Ledge Council, you know, we definitely want to support that, because this is, as you guys have described, it's critically important. And I really appreciate one of the first points on your slide that showed, you know, the value of giving us $1 saves you so many dollars down the road, and obviously value in, you know, investments. It really is an investment. I mean, I know it's a donation because you guys are a tax deductible organization, but it's really an investment in the future of our community, right? Like, you've done a great job of explaining how that all ties together and what the advantages are for us as a community.
Right. We always say that even if you or your family isn't touched by this, or even if you don't, you know, you have some distaste for it, this issue, we'll all be better off if addicted people are treated, because then they won't be, you know, on the streets. Now, not everyone will turn their life around, but however many do, that's less burden on the whole community. And, you know, we see it, we drive around and we see it. And I've been here 36 years. I know Nancy's been here longer. We never used to see that. And so it's a frightening thing. But when you start to take action, you say, well, that's how you conquer your fear, is you're doing something.
Yeah. And I think, like we said before, as humans, it's just easier to look away or ignore it or something. And then when it occurs within your own family, you have to deal with it. You don't have a choice. And, you know, for all of us to be more compassionate, that's a hard thing to get somebody to think about, but that's really what it's about. Instead of just turning your back on, you know, an issue, to say, hey, how can we lean in? And if we all work on this together, it's going to be better for our whole community. Well, we are down to 4 minutes, so we'll start to wrap up. But is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you guys want to make sure that we discuss today? Is there something that we left off of our list?
Nancy, you have some ideas?
Well, I think we covered a lot of ground. I just want to emphasize, as we move now into a new legislative session, that last year we were able to get $5 million for the Recovery Center from the state due to the cooperation, as you mentioned, Karl. And it was actually through the Legislative Council that our presentation was made to our representatives in large part. So the representatives from the 8th, 9th, and 16th district have all come together to support this. We are so grateful for our representatives and senators at the state level. It just wouldn't be happening without them. So I want to just thank them publicly for the work that they've done to make this a reality.
Yeah, no, we all appreciate the work that they do, and obviously being an elected official, whether it is at the city, county, or state level, we've got some amazing leaders that are really doing a good job for us. Yeah, there's no doubt.
I would just
Michelle, anything else we did? Yeah.
Oh, well, I would say that, you know, every person can do something. And one thing you can do that's pretty easy is just, if someone is suffering or their family member, talk about it, talk to them. Don't shut down and be silent. The secrecy, the stigma, the shame is a huge barrier. It has been. And one of the things we try to do is to say the word out loud, you know, okay, your child is addicted. Let's talk, let's have coffee. Let me bring you dinner. As you would if the person had a car accident. Not, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say, so I better hide from that person. I'll pretend I don't see them. I'll turn away at church or whatever. You've got to open up. You've got to say, you know, it's everywhere. Come on, let's talk about it. Just opening it up is going to help immensely.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think oftentimes, you know, there's a societal view of like, I can't be open about these issues, or I can't ask for help, or I can't, you know, and those are things that everybody deals with, but that embarrassment and everything else. And I really appreciate what you guys said about this plan for the peers that have been there for the patients themselves, but then also kind of that peer group for families, right? To be able to do what you just described, I think that's huge. And that's, I mean, just as people, that helps all of us to understand better and to realize there's some support, and ultimately that we're not in this alone, that
Right.
you know, there's other people that have been through it, and it's a really great point. Well, thank you both. We're almost out of time, but this has been a really good discussion. It's always great to see you guys, even virtually on Zoom, but thanks for your time this morning. And thanks, I guess, really just, you know, as people and as friends, thanks for sharing your story, because I know it's not easy. Obviously, it's very, very tragic, and the things that you guys and your families have been through, I can't even imagine. But thank you for sharing that, and thank you for all your work on this. I think they're really, we know that there are some great things that are going to come out of this for everyone in our community, and you know, we really just thank you for your work.
Thank you, Karl.
Thank you very much, Karl. We appreciate it.
Yeah. So Michelle, happy birthday, and happy December 1st to everybody else. And hopefully the snow's going to turn into rain, and we don't have to worry about driving anymore. So
I'm looking out my window. Yes.
Yeah, it's exactly. Checking the weather. Well, thank you both, and everybody have a great weekend. Thanks.
Thank you, Karl. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye.